and welcome to the bad, the bold, and the beautiful Dolphins Talk podcast. Coming to you live from Anchor FM Studios with your hosts, Jared Smalley and Justin Harris.
What's up, Fan Clans? Welcome to another episode of the Bad, the Bold, and Beautiful Dolphins Sports Talk podcast. Today we're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins and the New York Giants football game. It really was a tale of two halves. The first half, the Dolphins were up 10-7 at halftime. The final score, as you all know, 36-20 in favor of the Giants. Up until that last touchdown the Dolphins got in the last 2 minutes of the game, they were being outscored 29-3 in the second half. The Giants completely dominated the second half, whereas the Dolphins completely dominated the first quarter and a half or so. I know when they were up 7-0 in the second quarter, right after that I looked at the stats, the total yards. The Dolphins had 185 yards, the Giants had 41. They were not moving the ball well. The Dolphins had missed a couple opportunities before they finally scored the first touchdown. I know they had missed a field goal, and then they were deep down inside the Giants' territory the next possession, and they lost the ball on downs. And then the third drive is when they actually cashed in. The Giants were able to move the ball a little bit, but, they were only able to get 41 yards in the first three drives. And then, of course, they were able to punch it in on their fourth drive right after the Dolphins scored their touchdown to tie the game up. And there was a couple of defensive pass interferences that let that drive continue. Had those calls not been made, the Giants would have had no yards on the drive and went 3-0 or 3-and-out and kicked a punt, obviously. That didn't happen. There was a pass interference called on the Giants' fourth possession. They had a 24-yard pass interference call on Nick Needham, which gave them first down and 10 at their own 49-yard line. In the very next play, Eli Manning threw a 51-yard touchdown pass, and that, of course, is what tied the game up. I'm sorry, that wasn't a pass interference call on Nick Needham. That was on Brooks. And the 51-yard touchdown pass was a Golden Tate. That was with about 8:01 left to go in the first half. Excuse me. Then Miami ends up punting the ball in the next drive that they had it. The Giants start at their own 1-yard line, and then Eli Manning was intercepted by Beal, and he returned it to the Giants' 28. It was a 7-yard return. The Dolphins end up getting a field goal out of that, the very end of the half, and that's how the half ended. Miami was up 10-7. Halftime statistics, the total yardage was in favor of the Dolphins at 234 to 152. Dolphins were winning in every category at halftime. The time of possession, the Dolphins had it for 6 minutes and 36 more seconds at 18 minutes and 18 seconds to the Giants' 11 minutes and 42 seconds. The penalty yards were pretty even. Dolphins had gotten 3 penalties for 34 yards. The Giants had 3 penalties for 25 yards. Each team had 1 sack. Yards per play were pretty even. The Giants were at 6.1 yards per play. The Dolphins at 6 yards flat per play. The biggest differences here in the first half was the turnovers. The Giants had 2. The Dolphins had 0. Total plays, Miami had 39. The Giants had 25. First downs, Miami 14. The Giants 8. And, just as I read a second ago, the total yardage was 234 to 152 in favor of the Dolphins. And head-to-head stats at that point, Ryan Fitzpatrick, he was 17 for 25, 201 yards with 1 touchdown. He also was a leading rusher at that time with 2 carries, 24 yards. Albert Wilson had 5 catches, 59 yards. Devontae Parker, 3 catches for 43 yards and a touchdown. And Mike Gillespie, he had 3 catches for 42 yards. Walford, 2 catches, 34 yards. And Alan Hearns, 1 catch for 9 yards. On the Giants side, Eli Manning at halftime was 8 for 14, 116 yards. 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Barkley had 10 carries for 46 yards. And Golden Tate had 1 catch for 51 yards and a touchdown. Eli Manning's quarterback rating was a 68.5. at halftime, and Ryan Fitzpatrick was 105.6. As you can see, the Dolphins were well on their way of, if they continued playing the way they did in the first half and brought that into the second half, they were going to be in control and maybe even play ahead for most of the game, if not the entire game, and hold the Giants back and secure a lead, maybe get a 2-score lead and finish the Giants off that way. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The Giants took the first drive in the second half, 6 plays, 70 yards, took 3 minutes and 7 seconds, and a touchdown to Slayton for to tie it. Well, for them to actually take the lead, 14-10 at that point. Slayton also had a catch earlier in the drive for 26 yards. It was an opening play in the second half, and then you had the touchdown. And then the Dolphins get the ball. 3 plays, 5 yards. Fitzpatrick fumbles the ball. The Giants recover at Miami's 33-yard line. Fortunately, Eli Manning is picked off for a third time, this time by Jerome Baker. He takes the return 34 yards from the Dolphins' 15, returns it 34 yards all the way down to Miami's 49. The Dolphins take it 5 plays, 22 yards, and Jason Sanders hits a 47-yard field goal, making it 14-13 Giants with about 10 minutes left to play in the third quarter. I wrote it down, 8:49 left at that point. Then the Giants take it 4 plays, 17 yards, and have to punt it. And this is where the game turns around. So it's 14-13. Miami has it at the 3-yard line. Then they get a penalty, backs them up to about the 1.5 yards. And then Patrick Laird is tackled in the end zone for a safety. They had 2 plays, then give 3 yards, had it for about 4 or 5 seconds. And now Miami's down 16-13. Well, then all of a sudden, Miami is forced to kick the ball at their own 20 instead of, the 35. They have to kick it from their own 20. So the Giants already going to get in good field position. They take it 30 yards all the way down. The return 30 yards to the Dolphins 40. And then, the very first play, Shepard gets a 15-yard pass reception already down to the Miami's 25. Then he gets a 24-yard run all the way down the Dolphins' 1-yard line, and then boom, touchdown. In about 1 minute and 4 seconds, it goes 14-13 Giants to 23-13 Giants. And the Dolphins just couldn't recover after that. Pretty soon the score is 36-13 Giants, and then Miami gets a touchdown again with about 2 minutes left to play in the game to cut it to 36-20, but the Dolphins just couldn't get anything going at that point, and after that safety, it was just downhill from the Dolphins. Hi guys, I just want to take a moment out of your day to talk to you about Anchor. It is a podcast platform that you can use to create your very own podcast for free. They have everything you need in one place. Anchor has creation tools that you can use to record and edit your own podcasts right from your smartphone or computer. It doesn't get a whole lot easier than that, in addition to that great service. Once you have completed your podcast, Anchor will do all the work for you to ensure that the podcast gets as many listeners as possible by distributing your masterpiece to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. And that's the best part of Anchor. It literally has everything you need in one place to create your very own podcast. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome back, Fin Clan. So as I was saying, that after that safety happened, the Dolphins just could not recover. Really, after Miami went up 7-0 and they were outgaining the Giants 185-41, there was a stretch that the Giants completely dominated the Dolphins. And it pretty much started after the Dolphins went up 7-0. It's almost like when the score was 0-0, Miami was dominating. They just were missing opportunities to score points, kind of like they did last week against the Jets. But after Miami went up 7-0, so from that moment on until the Dolphins got the touchdown at the very end of the game, they were outscored. Actually, even before the Giants scored their last touchdown, this is when they were up 30-13. They had outgained the Dolphins 30-6 at that point, since Miami was up 7-0, because they were up 30-13. So they actually scored another touchdown after this, the 44-yard drive that when Miami went for it on 4th and 12 at their own 44, they didn't get it. Big surprise, and the Giants went down and scored a touchdown to make it 36-13. But before that drive, the Dolphins were outgained by the Giants 308 yards to 74. So again, that was after the Dolphins were up 7-0, and from that point to the Giants being up 30-6, they had outgained the Dolphins 308 to 74 in terms of yards. The second half was completely different than the first half, especially when time of possession is involved. Again, the Dolphins had it for 18 minutes and 18 seconds in the first half. The Giants 11 minutes and 42 seconds, with a difference of 6 minutes and 36 seconds for the in favor of the Dolphins. The second half, the Dolphins had it for 10 minutes and 35 seconds. The Giants had it for 19 minutes and 25 seconds, a difference of 8 minutes and 50 seconds. So they had the ball longer than the Dolphins had in the second half. They outgained the Dolphins 260 to 150 in yards. They had 168 passing yards Eli Manning did of his 274 yards throwing for the game. The Dolphins only had 66 yards in the air. Miami did have 84 yards on the ground, but still was eclipsed by the Giants, who had 92 more yards in the second half on the ground. Total plays in the second half was in favor of the Giants. Big surprise, 38-30. First downs, the Giants had 16 in the second half. The Dolphins only had 8. The yards per play was increased by 0.4 yards to the Giants, negative 0.4 yards to the Dolphins. The Dolphins had 4 penalties for 8 yards in the second half. The Giants had 1 for 7 yards. Each team had 1 turnover in the second half, but the Giants were able to get 2 more sacks on Ryan Fitzpatrick, whereas the Dolphins only sacked Eli Manning once, and that was it in the whole game. So, I mean, the whole first half, the Dolphins won every category except for a couple. By the end of the game, the Dolphins had lost every category but a couple. They won the turnovers, and they won the total plays for the game, and that's it. The head-to-head matchup for the game leaders, Ryan Fitzpatrick finished the game for 23 for 41, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have a fumble. Top leading rusher for the Dolphins was Patrick Laird. He had 12 rushes for 46 yards. Receiving, Devontae Parker had 4 catches, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Albert Wilson had 5 catches, 59 yards, all in the first half. Mike Gillespie had 4 catches for 47 yards. Rushing, Myles Gaskins had 9 carries for 43 yards. Ryan Fitzpatrick rushed it 4 times for 33 yards. So just added little stats to the Dolphins rushing, because as a team, they did rush for a fairly good game, 122 yards, which is exactly what they had rushing last week against the Jets, which is about 60 yards more than they normally have. I think they're around 62, 63 yards per game. The last 2 games, they were able to double that or be close to doubling that. For the Giants, their leaders, obviously Eli Manning, he was 20 for 28, 283 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Rushing, Barkley ended the game with 24 carries, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns. Shepard had 9 catches for 111 yards. So the Giants were able to do anything that they pretty much wanted to on the ground and in the air. And unfortunately, there's the storyline of the Dolphins' defense. Their defense plays great at times, and then at other times it's like, who am I watching? And that's pretty much happened today. Most of the damage was done in the third quarter, and obviously being outscored 16-3 in the third quarter really turned the game around. The Giants did add more damage in the fourth quarter, but at that point the Dolphins were going for it in field positions where they normally would punt it, giving the Giants shorter field to have to go and score. So it's pretty much just adding insult to injury in the fourth quarter. Pretty much is the consequences of playing terribly in the third quarter. So that being said, obviously the Dolphins were not able to recover. They did bounce back statistically enough to make it somewhat interesting as far as total yards go. I mean, it did favor the Giants at 412, the Dolphins at 384. So, I mean, it was only a difference of 28 yards. The Giants had more than the Dolphins. They only had 12 more yards passing at 274 to 262. They only had 16 more yards on the ground. The Giants had 138. The Dolphins 160 or 122. First downs, I mean, Giants 22, Dolphins 20, or excuse me, Giants had 24, Dolphins 22. I mean, when you look at the final categories, they're pretty tight for the most part. I mean, the only differences is obviously the score was the biggest category. The difference, 36 to 20. Everything else is pretty tight. But obviously, the game wasn't close. Giants ended their 9-game losing streak and pretty much just in the second half decimated the Dolphins. The next coming up game is against the Bengals. The Dolphins have them at home. The last home game for the year for the Dolphins. And it's the first time all year the Dolphins statistically are favored to beat a team. According to ESPN, they give the Dolphins a 50% chance, the Bengals a 49.6% chance of winning, with an 0.4% chance of a tie. So that's why it's not 50-50. They're averaging in that little chance of a tie game. Points per game, the Dolphins actually have 1.8 more points per game. They're averaging 17 points per game. The Bengals 15.2. The Bengals allow about 25 points a game. The Dolphins just under 31, but obviously they allowed more than that today. So the Dolphins allow about 5.5 more points per game than the Bengals. Total yardage, the Bengals get about 336, the Dolphins 304. Through the air, the Bengals throw for 250 yards, the Dolphins about 237. Rushing is about 86 for the Bengals, 67 for the Dolphins. So offensively, the Bengals edge out the Dolphins in every category. Defensively, the Dolphins allow a little bit fewer yards than the Bengals. Miami at 406.6, the Bengals at 410.2. Passing, the Bengals allow 253.5, the Dolphins allow 265.5. So about 12 more yards through the air, but the Dolphins allow 15.6 yards fewer rushing than the Bengals. The Bengals at 156.7, the Dolphins at 141.1, which is pretty much what they allow today. So, you know, it is what it is. For the season, not including today's game, Ryan Fitzpatrick is 229 for 368 attempts, 2,511 yards, 13 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. Now, obviously, that's 15 touchdowns he's got. Mark Walton is still the leading rusher on the Dolphins team, which is sad. Devontae Parker, he's now got 59 catches for 905 yards. Actually, he's got more than that. He's got a little bit more than that. I think he only needs... actually, he had 882 coming into the game, and he finished the game with... I know I wrote it down. I think he had 72. So I think he only needs about 50 yards. So he's got about 950 yards on the season, 8 touchdowns. So he's doing well. He's 8 touchdowns. I want to say doubles his season best up until this year. So he's doing well. He's definitely earning his contract extensions. The Bengals, Andy Dalton is 24 for 413 attempts, 2,777 yards at 10 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Mixon has got 206 carries for 789 yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. And the receiver, Boy, has got 73 receptions, 833 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So I think that the Dolphins get their 4th win of the season. They, the last home game, they put it together. And I want to say the final score is 27-17. The Dolphins don't dominate every category, but I mean, as you've seen, offensively and defensively, they're not very far spread apart in any one category. And I think because Miami's playing at home, they're going to have the crowd behind them. And they won 2 home games recently, really. I think that that's going to propel them, and they're going to play well. And the Bengals are just going to make too many mistakes, and Dolphins are going to win 27-17. That's my final prediction. Until next time, God bless, stay safe. Goodbye.